Welcome to Discograffiti's 2025 Patreon membership super drive. Now more than ever with our Beach Boys series underway, much of which will be living exclusively on our Patreon platform, this is the time to join. And I'm going to make it super easy for you. At the lieutenant or major tier, in addition to 3 or 4 shows a week, access to the gigantic archive of Patreon back episodes, and your backstage pass, you'll also get the following. An onboarding call with me during which you'll tell me all your ideas on how to make the podcast you'd like to hear. And whether I use all, some, or none of your ideas, I'll have listened closely and most importantly, gotten to know you. Plus, 3 months into your membership, you'll be eligible to appear on the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. That's right, an entire episode all about you, your band, your band's album, your band's tour, or whatever other cool stuff you might be up to. And not only do we make the episode, we promote it for you too. Last but not least, you'll receive a completely free digital copy of Metal Machine Muzak, which otherwise costs $11. Metal Machine Muzak is Discograffiti's double album Lou Reed tribute featuring 16-minute pieces by Lou Barlow from Sebadoh and Dino Jr., Corey Hansen from Wand, Mark Robinson from Unrest, and W. Cullen Hart from Olivia Tremor Control. Please tell all your music-obsessive friends. In fact, if your friends do sign up, be sure to email me at info@discograffiti.com and let me know who they are, because I'll be sending you an additional surprise gift on top of everything else as a token of my gratitude. And now, without further ado, the greatest music commentary podcast in all the land, I bring you Discograffiti.
You get married at 16... and then all of a sudden, this man's creativity just goes into this like huge catapult. And she was trying to like embrace it, support it, be there for him as a friend, a wife, a supporter, but also terrified. It was a big roller coaster for her. The love was always there.
And it seems like it's still there.
It is still there. You know, it's a beautiful thing to witness that, because it's like the as a kid of parents who get divorced, it's like you're sad You're sad that the marriage did last, but you're so appreciative that they still have love.
Welcome to Discograffiti's wildly in-depth Beach Boys series and Your Dreams Come True, where Brian Wilson freaks like you and me get our chance to delve deep into the barely believable history and prodigious discography of my favorite band of all time, and also coincidentally the best, along with a slew of top-shelf guests ranging from musicians inspired by their work, family members, documentary directors, songwriting collaborators, Beach Boys authors, producers, touring band members, and for good measure, some of the Beach Boys themselves. I'm your host, Dave Gebrow, and special thanks goes out to Jeff McAvoy and especially co-producer Dennis Dyken, without whom this series would not have happened. And in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Carnie Wilson. This is part 1 of the longest interview that Carnie Wilson's ever given, and on a subject she rarely speaks out about, her father's band. She picked her 7 favorite Beach Boys releases, plus 1 solo album, which taken together forms a patchwork quilt that defines the essence of Dad as she knows him. Keep in mind, more than 50% of Discograffiti's Beach Boys series will be available exclusively on our Patreon platform, as I support a wife and a 6-year-old son with Discograffiti as my sole source of income. So if you're not a subscriber on the lieutenant or major tier, you'll only be getting a fraction of the story. To subscribe, just visit patreon.com/discograffiti. Here's just a few of the many things Carnie and I discuss in this podcast. Her father's typical breakfast in the 1970s, Carnie's memories of Grandpa Murry, how her parents felt about her Playboy appearance, What music's been playing uninterrupted on a loop for the last 19 years in Carnie's home? Carnie's fraught experiences while being looked after by Dr. Eugene Landy? And her feelings on pet sounds and friends? If you're a Beach Boys superfan like me, you'll want to turn this free version off right now and opt for the director's cut of this episode on our Patreon page, which features 13 additional minutes of essential material. And you can find it in our Patreon shop for mere pennies at patreon.com/discograffiti/shop. Or better yet, just subscribe for access to the complete versions of all our shows. I recommend the Lieutenant tier at the very least, so you can access those director's cuts, but the major tier is what you want if you want it all. And I'm covering a bunch of these Beach Boys records on the major tier. Even if you're on the fence, just head over there because it's finally free to become a basic member. Coming up, we've got Al Jardine, Marilyn Wilson, Don Was, Ginger Blake, Pete Buck, Scott McGahee, Ira Kaplan from Yola Tango, The Cars' Elliot Easton, Sonic Boom, Don Fleming, Marshall Crenshaw, Lenny Kaye, The Righteous Brothers Bill Medley, Russ Titleman, Jerry Schilling, Greg Jacobson, Christian Love, Gary Griffin, David Beard, Probin Gregory, John Cowsill, David Leaf, Don Randy, John Stebbins, Rob Bonfilio, Wyatt Funderburk, Stephen Kalinich, Matt Jardine, Fred Vale, Sam Parker, Brent Wilson, Mark Lynette, Alan Boyd, Carly Minoz, and many more. So don't miss out. Open up your listening app right now and subscribe. And away we go then. The music that your dad made. You know, when I think of the Beach Boys, and it's funny, it's my dad's favorite band, but when he thinks of them, he thinks of I Get Around and Fun, Fun, Fun. When I think of them, I think of The Lonely Sea, Until I Die. So to us, there are two very different bands. So to me, like the beating heart of what it is that your dad did, it's like the song Good Timin'. It's a happy song that's presented in a depressed way.
Yeah. Well said.
You know, so there's so much sadness imbued in the music. And you said that the music is your childhood. It's mine too, but for very different reasons.
Yeah. Well, it's my childhood. It's my adolescence. It's everything. And it's today. So it's like ever changing, but ever remaining, you know. I'm not a historian. I'm not an expert. I'm not somebody that knows their catalog like you do. I know what I know. And if I don't know it, I don't have anything to say about it. And if I have something to say about it, I will. So did I dive into certain things more? Yes. Is there still a world of stuff that I don't know? Yes. And if somebody's listening and they go, well, that's a shame she doesn't know that yet. Well, maybe it just it's not my time to listen to it yet. And there's a reason for that. Maybe it'll serve purpose later, but you can ask me anything you want. But just to let you know, like my brain is so like, just from like all the pot I smoked and just like in my mid 50s and just the evolution of my brain, music triggers things for me. So like I might be referring to some of these songs like from my phone and play them for a second. Like it triggers stuff for me. So that's all I want to say.
Today's guest is a singer, songwriter, actress, business owner, and television personality. She also shares DNA with some pretty amazing people. But she's not just the offspring of musical royalty. This woman is royalty. Along with younger sister Wendy and childhood friend China Phillips, she's the co-founder of Wilson Phillips, whose first two albums alone, Wilson Phillips and Shadows and Light, have sold 12 million copies. The group also enjoyed 3 U.S. #1 singles and 6 top 20 hits before disbanding in 1993. She and her sister continued recording together. There was the Christmas album Hey Santa in 1993, the 1997 album with Pops called The Wilsons, and the 2004 Wilson Phillips reunion LP California, which featured a slew of Mamas and Papas and Beach Boys covers. In 2006, after her first daughter was born, there was a mother's gift, Lullabies from the Heart, followed by a 2007 Christmas album. Then there was her talk show, the reality show about about her, the reality show about Wilson Phillips, about 10 other reality shows, her guest host work on CBS's The Talk, her Love Bites gourmet bakery business, not to mention a marriage going on 24 years strong to musician and producer Rob Bonfiglio. Plus, she's now mom to 2 young ladies born in 2005 and 2009. Her uncles also just happen to be Dennis Wilson and Carl Wilson. She's cousins with Mike Love. Her mom is Marilyn Wilson of the Honeys in Spring. And of course, Pops is Tops. In my estimation, the greatest to ever grace the music industry in the history of all that ever was. Lads and ladies out there keeping a tally of what need be done so as not to break a sweat over standing in the shadows of giants. Prick up your ears, because she's done it all, and at the kind of pace that presumably strikes a chord with Brian from back in the days of his 60s pop race. She's seamlessly stapled but refuses to be labeled. They absolutely broke the mold. It's the one and only Carnie Wilson.
Holy shit, what an intro. Oh my gosh. Hi, darling. And also, there's one thing you forgot.
What's that?
Playboy.
Oh, shit. What year was that?
2002, which my dad did not approve of, by the way. My husband goes, you need to call them and ask them for your permission, your mom and your dad. I called separately, and my mom was like, sure, why not? Go for it. And dad was like, I don't approve. That was it. I was going to do it anyway. I just wanted them to know that it was going to be tasteful. But I'm just laughing because it was like the biggest intro I've ever had. And then you've left out Playboy, which bought a house for me, by the way. You know, oh my gosh.
That's awesome. I mean, if you're going to do it, go for Playboy and not Swank or Hustler.
oh God in heaven. No. It was actually a very tasteful story. A very important story, actually.
I didn't look. Maybe after this interview, but not before.
That's all right.
It would have made me too nervous.
I don't care. I'm so open.
I personally want to kick things off by flipping a card because I know you're very open. So just in terms of setting the tone for what hopefully will be, a very open conversation for both of us, not just you, I want to let you know that the stapling, the surgery that you did, which is 25 years ago this year, right?
Yeah, 1999.
I actually am a member of Overeaters Anonymous. Today is 11 years and 4 days, and I am no stranger to utilizing food as comfort. Yeah, I don't know if that's, the situation you had with food. It seems like it's something that your dad struggled with, as well as, because all the things that one can turn to fill a hole, it's the only thing that literally fills the hole.
I've always had issues with food, and it is the source of comfort, and it's also just the love of eating and food. I feel like I can speak for myself. I can't speak for my dad or anybody else in the world. I can speak for myself, but I know who I relate to, and I know who I'm related to, and that is my mom and dad, and they are food lovers. I don't think anything makes my dad happier or more excited than food. I mean, that's the truth. To know my dad is to know that he loves a good steak and potatoes and asparagus, and he loves, a piece of pie or cheesecake.
I happen to know, by the way, that the last time he went to Musso and Frank's, which was very recently, he started dinner with a creme brulee.
He loves Musso and Frank's, and we're going to go there soon together. But he does everything kind of backwards, and I get it. He does love creme brulee. Yeah. My very early memories, with food was that my dad, we had this housekeeper named Martha. She was a good cook. We found out she was like stealing steaks and shit from the house, which really kind of sucks, Yeah. But she also was kind of mean, and she used to spank us and stuff. But she used to make dad, he would eat, his typical breakfast was a dozen eggs and a loaf of bread. Wow. Not a piece of bread, not 2 eggs, but, a dozen eggs and a loaf of bread.
We're talking the 1970s now, right?
Yeah, the 70s. This would be the early 70s. Yeah. And so he would eat really fast. He was like a motor. Yeah. He ate so fucking fast. And we hardly ever had dinner together because he was always finished before we started. So by the time that mom got dinner on the table for everyone, he would eat his steak in about 3 bites. and then he would hold it in his mouth and make it last. And he was already at the piano playing the piano while we would eat dinner.
And writing songs about getting and staying healthy. That's what I love about your dad. He's got a million songs about being healthy and the importance of being healthy.
Right. Getting old, or, your hair or your vegetables, it's just hysterical.
Yeah. It's the best. The dichotomy of Brian Wilson.
Yeah. I mean, like, everyone loves to talk about like the negative stuff and the tragedies and the shit, but there is so much humor and so much laughter and love and spirituality. And I'm sure we'll really delve into all of that.
Yes. Yeah. So let's explain to the listener what we decided would be the best way of going about doing this, which I think actually, in preparing for this, I think is brilliant and is the perfect way to have done this, which is kind of a roundabout way of telling the Beach Boys story through the lens of 8 albums that you personally selected, albums that range across a 22-year span from the years 1966 through 1988, and ending just as your career begins and you turn 20 years old.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the first Beach Boys album or song that you remember hearing? Also with the knowledge that the guy upstairs who plays little lullabies to you to soothe you when you're crying is actually responsible for what you're hearing.
Let's see. I mean, we lived in Bel Air. And they were making records while I was in the womb. When did Friends come out?
You were 2 months.
Okay, so 68. I would probably say that was the first music that was surrounding me, but I was too young to remember hearing that. And I have my connections with different albums for different reasons. But I'm going to say it's Good Vibrations, because it was like that first note of Carl's voice. I think that's exactly what would be my earliest memory. It's interesting. His voice, I was thinking about this, about the layers. When I think of the Beach Boys, I think of the word layers, because I feel like whether it's the instruments or their vocals, when all of them sang together, there's the sound. When they sang separately, there was a sound. But there was a similarity with all of their voices. And that's why I think they just went so well together. But the earliest memories of the music was definitely Pet Sounds, I think, and God Only Knows, and Wouldn't It Be Nice? Yeah.
Did you have a rebellious anti-Beach Boys phase as a difficult teenager?
No, I never did. But I had a lot of laughter when we discovered, like, she's going bald. Yeah. Wendy and I we would be hysterical. Like, I was just busy being a kid growing up in school, just having friends and socializing. I was very social. We always had a lot of people coming over, a hectic childhood with just weird shit going on all the time. So a lot of it was actually just really about survival in many ways, but also witnessing a ton of creativity that I wasn't aware was creativity, and battling a lot of demons, and then really hardcore behavior, and then a divorce. So it's like you can fill in those gaps with a lot of beautiful things, and most of them come from music. I didn't really discover the Beach Boys and what the music and all the arrangements and their voices and the songs and the songwriting meant to me until I was about 13, after we moved out of Bel Air house and moved to Encino, and my parents were separated. So that's when I got my headphones out, and that's when I started really diving into the pool of the Beach Boys. I would say there is not a Beach Boys song that I don't like. I like them all. Some are more dark than others. Some of them are scary as fuck. Like, Is it Mrs. O'Leary's Cow? Is that what it's called?
O'Leary's Cow, yeah.
It scares the fuck out of me. And I was reminding myself of that. It's like, that is a horrible nightmare acid trip. Yeah, Smile was, I never really got into it. But there's songs that were darker and that were scary to me when I was a kid. The word scary is really what I use.
Mrs. O'Leary's Cow was terrifying to your dad, too. He believes that he unleashed something with that, or at least at the time he believed it. And I believe that his music does actually strike a primordial chord, because it affects people in such ways. I mean, you see how people react to your dad's music. It's not like the normal reactions to music. Your dad's fans can be crazy, right? I'm sure you have a million stories about dealing with Brian Wilson lunatics, David Leaf being the ultimate one. As much as I love David, he's like the ultimate Brian Wilson lunatic. People out there who've devoted their lives to the study and the love of Brian Wilson. So that's a lot to contend with. I'm seeking my dad's attention. I'm 52 years old, and my dad is not world famous.
As his daughter, I have to be able to separate myself. I have to be able, willing, and I'm forced to separate the dad, the father, and the artist and the creator. There's a role there and there's a role over there. And he wasn't a hands-on father, but he's my father. And that love is there. It always has been and always will be. But for me, as an artist myself, and the influence that he's had on me and where I come from, I feel his energy and his creativity in me. I feel personality similarities. We're very similar. And Murray has a lot to do with it too. There's a bit of Murray in there too. And there's a bit of Audrey too. You know, there's so many ways to dissect it all, but there has to be a separation with who he is, who he was, where he comes from on a human level versus the music. And so when you talk about Beach Boy fans and how weird they can be, what is that weirdness about and what is surrounding that? That's what I sort of question. Why is somebody obsessed with the Beach Boys or Brian Wilson?
Why are they obsessed then? Why do you think that they're obsessed?
I think it's because of his vulnerability as a person. Mm-hmm. I think because Dad has always been vulnerable in the sense that he's like an open book. So when you talk to him, it's very hard for him to hide his emotions. I mean, even though he talks about in a lot of his lyrics that he doesn't express himself, maybe he'll hide or something. You hear him say that in his lyrics in different songs, but he can't help himself. He's so fucking real and he's so vulnerable and he's kept the childlike quality in him to this day and he's 82. It's never changed. That has never changed. So I think people gravitate towards authenticity. And even if that authenticity is a trip and multifaceted and layered, I think there's still a mystery, even if he has been vulnerable and he has been expressive in certain ways. You kind of want to get to know a genius. How does a genius's mind work? How does it operate? What are the thought processes? You know, I mean, like you think of like Beethoven, Mozart, you know, centuries ago, whatever, we don't know them. Time was different. How was he able to create this and what influenced him around it? People want to dissect it and understand it.
That word, although true, because that word is so overused at this point, genius.
Right.
So overused. But what I think makes your dad a genius is just as you and I are speaking to each other and we're attempting to find the correct words to convey the thoughts that we have, and we're able to find those words, he's able to do that in a musical way that other people are not.
But I don't think he had any control over what he was creating. I think it was divine. He told me it was divine. He told me it wasn't him, that it was God. I clearly asked him. He came over one day after my parents got divorced. He was over visiting. He was teaching me, I think it was the day he was teaching me Sloop John B. and California Girls on the piano, because I really wanted to know like the intro of California Girls and Sloop John B. And I said to him, how many songs do you think you've written? He was all about 500. And I said, well, how did you do that? You know, I mean, I was like, 13. I was very curious because that's when I started getting into the music. And it was like really blowing my mind because I was interested too. And harmony, I mean, I'm still obsessed with it every minute, every day. And it was because of his harmonies. I mean, I grew up listening to all these great harmonies, Carpenters, Fleetwood Mac, Eagles, but it was his particular arrangements that made me curious more about harmony. So when I asked him, how did you write all those songs? He goes, I didn't write them. God did. And I went, what the fuck do you mean? I didn't understand that. But now as a woman in my 50s, I understand that it's an intervention and he doesn't know where it comes from and he doesn't have to. But I do think when we go back to the fans, there's like someone that's famous that has written music that has touched them in such a way that no other music has touched them. They become obsessed because no one has done that to them. So it's almost like, not like a stalker. It's just, there's a little bit of a psychoness attached to it. There's a little bit of a weirdness because I think in the back of everybody's mind, they're never going to fully get the answers. They're never going to fully get to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're never going to get anything more than that music. But boy, do they want it. But you have to understand, it's very easy to break down my dad. It's very easy to break him down. It's about spirituality, love, and fear, and harmony. That's it. I mean, that's actually it. That's all.
Oh, hi, I'm Dave Gebrow. I threw my career as a licensed hearing instrument specialist in the trash, sold my house, and moved to the East Coast with my wife and 5-year-old son in order to focus on making the ultimate weekly podcast for music obsessives thrive. But weekly wasn't enough for me, so I bumped it up to 4 shows a week. Becoming a subscriber to Discograffiti's Patreon gives you access to hundreds of exclusive episodes. As a 2-show-per-week private, you get the weekly show by and for our Patreon family, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast. As a 3-show-a-week lieutenant, you'll get early release, ad-free, extended director's cuts of the main show. They're the shows as they were intended to be heard. Plus, you'll gain access to half the Patreon archive and the upcoming Beach Boys Behind the Mirror companion episodes, which will feature dozens of special guests from within the Beach Boys camp talking about and rating their music. But as a 4-show-per-week major, you'll be drowning in a flood of must-hear binge listening, because I'll be bombarding you with episodes about super cool bands that are too subterranean for free Fridays. It's like going to music college, but with a tuition that makes all kinds of sense. Plus, our entire Patreon archive is yours. Discograffiti's Top 10, our Buried Treasure show, Rock Cousteau, our Slag Off show, Queasy Listening, and the Private Press with Paul Major. And all that for the price of only a cup of coffee a week. Times are tough, you say? Fret not, because there's a $1 tier. Or you could just join as a basic member and buy episodes piecemeal from our Patreon shop. Don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not giving. Check out patreon.com/discograffiti to find the tier that's right for you. Once again, that's patreon.com/discograffiti. Let's dive in. So album number 1, you were not born yet. In fact, you were -2. So we're starting right now in December of 1965. Your dad is at home with your mom, and he's listening to I believe the American edition of Rubber Soul. In fact, I read it was the American version, but do you know by chance if it was actually the British import?
It would probably be the American version.
Okay, so he was impressed that the album seemed to lack any filler at all, which at the time was mostly unheard of. So, you know, your dad had found that Rubber Soul subverted this by having a consistent thread of music and a really cohesive sound, which was really capitalizing on folk rock. So the wheels started turning. Those same wheels had turned before. In fact, many people believe the Beach Boys today was a dry run for Pet Sounds. Some even believe it outdoes it, but that's another episode entirely. So inspired to the gills, your dad bursts out of his bedroom or wherever the hi-fi was kept. Where was it kept, do you know?
They were up in Laurel Way, so that was their first house together. So I don't know that. Probably in the living room.
Okay, so he bursts out of the living room and runs up to your mom proclaiming, "Marilyn, I'm going to make the greatest album, the greatest rock album ever made."
No, that's not what happened.
What happened? Please tell me.
She said that he said to her, "Mare, I think I just heard the best album I've ever heard in my life. How do I top it? I'm so scared. How do I top it?" Then he went into the studio and he came back one night after a session and he said to her, "I don't know if I can do this." And she said, "Don't worry, baby. Everything will turn out all right."
That's an amazing story. I had no idea.
She said, "Don't worry, baby." Yes.
Okay. By the way, each record that you picked, I'm starting the section off with a quote, and that's the only paraphrased one. And I'm so glad you corrected me because that's so much more interesting.
And when you talk to my mom about Murry, Grandpa pushed Dad and knew that he had that talent. And my mom said, "I liked Murry. I thought he was a great guy. Was he eccentric? Was he wild and out there and a little much? Yes. Did he stand up on the table and pull out his glass eye to scare everyone? No, that was a lie. That was a fucking lie."
It was a lie? Okay.
Yeah, he didn't do that.
Do you have any memories of him? I know you were 5 when he passed.
I do. I have memories. I remember going to their house in, I think it was at Whittier. I forgot the city even. They had this big living room. It was dark and there was like burgundy carpet. And he goes, come over here, Carnie, come sit on my lap. He smoked a pipe, and the smell was really offensive and really strong. And I just remember that smell and me sitting on his lap, and he was very nervous. He was bouncing me on his, on his knee. So I remember like bouncing on his knee with that fucking pipe right there. And he scared the shit out of me. He was so scary. He was just like abrasive and like, like his voice, and just, he was kind of like harsh and hardcore, I've had like weird psychics tell me stuff that he was very sorry, and he's very sorry that he did certain things and wants so badly to have been forgiven. And there's some pretty out there shit that I've experienced personally with that. And I believe every word of it. But I do think that he really damaged him, and he also inspired him. So that's a hard one. Yeah.
Yeah. Interestingly, at the very beginning, when he was having those combative confrontations with Brian in the studio, and he kept undoing and redoing the settings on the board, back when Nick Vinay was trying to be referee between the two of them, there's things that he did on the board that actually I believe were positives that, your dad obviously learned from, but I think that some of what the boys were playing early on shined through, like David Mark's guitar. I think you hear it in such a way, it's showcased in such a way because of Murray's proclivities toward taking out some of the bottom.
Yeah, Murray had talent. I mean, both Grandma Audrey and Murray had talent, and Dad is a product of them. So it's like, yeah, he definitely influenced. But I think he was jealous as well and intimidated.
Yes. So your first pick, Pet Sounds, is my second favorite album of all time. When Pet Sounds was assembled, your dad brought a complete acetate of it to your mom, who remembered that, and I'm sure she's spoken with you about this, that it was one of the most spiritual times of her whole life. They both sat there crying, listening to it. I'm sure you've spoken with her many times about it. So Pet Sounds, it's a work of greatness that's literally been compared to James Joyce's Ulysses, 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's just considered one of the great works of art of the 20th century, or really of all time. And it is. And what a lot of kiddos don't understand about Pet Sounds is that prior to its re-release in 1990, that it really was, at least in the United States, it was kind of obscure. Now it's ubiquitous. Now it's just a given that it's Pet Sounds at the top of the pyramid. But for a long time, not in England, but in the US, it was not as overt. You weren't battered over the head with it. Do you remember when things kind of changed and it was more in the culture that you couldn't escape references to Pet Sounds?
I just remember seeing that album cover and then like as a child being like, wow. And then I also remember Dad being like kind of obsessed with animal sounds. So like I was like, is this about animal sounds? I didn't know why it was called Pet Sounds. I actually still don't.
That was Mike. Mike called it Brian's Pet Sounds, like it was his world of sound, his pet sounds.
Ah, I see. But I didn't know that as a kid, but I remember being very, very, very taken aback by certain songs. And I mean, growing up with like Wouldn't It Be Nice and God Only Knows. I mean, God Only Knows, I have it tattooed on my arm right there. It's probably my favorite Beach Boys song. And Carl's vocal is just like nothing else in the world. I remember just being proud, very proud, just to be able to listen to it. It was like an honor to have something grace your ears like that. And being drawn to certain songs too, not really knowing all the songs. And then when I really got into You Still Believe in Me, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Well, see, there's a great reference point, because to take this work of art that is indisputably that it is a work of art, and, the whole thing, it being really a Brian Wilson solo record that's graced with Beach Boys harmonies, it really is kind of a solo record. I know that before Pet Sounds happened, that early on, I mean, your parents were kids, and they had some early marital struggles that apparently are reflected through the lyrics. What is that like to have this thing that's out there that's, considered to be this cultural touchstone that everybody knows about, that's about your parents' marriage?
Well, I mean, again, I have to separate all this shit from like the music, the public's perception, my perception, their perception. But for me, I think the melodies and the music is what I'm more drawn to than a lyric. I am more drawn to music and melody than lyrics. And for me, I've always struggled with writing lyrics. And I think Dad has struggled as well sometimes and sort of lacks that self-esteem that, quote, he's a good lyricist or something like that. But he's a wonderful lyricist.
That's why I love You so much, because if you're a Beach Boys fan and you don't like Love You, that means you're not interested in the Beach Boys, because isn't that Brian to his core?
To his core, and some of 15 Big Ones too. I mean, there's that innocent, childlike quality that is in every single Beach Boy record, but somehow he sort of dove into his own, not childhood. It's just the simplicity of some of his lyrics that I really appreciate. And he didn't try to impress or be something. He just was him. And that's what came out creatively. And it was always backed by some fucking crazy arrangement, some crazy chord change, brilliant, innovative, gorgeous, soul gripping chord change where you go, oh my God. And one time he was walking around the house, and this was like right around, I don't know, maybe 1977. I was around 9 or something. I go, what are you doing? He goes, I'm writing a song about a cigarette. Because he was trying to quit smoking. He smoked so much right before 15 Big Ones and Love You. And his voice, it was really hoarse because he was smoking like 2 packs a day. So he could not quit. We tried to get him to stop. And I flushed his cigarettes down the toilet one time. And that's the one time he spanked me. He gave me a big ass spanking. And then he walked around the house for about 2 hours crying. He was very upset that he gave me a spanking. And I remember, he hit me and it was really sad and he felt so bad about it. You have to understand, a lot of my memories of him as a kid is just like, we had a big house and he wandered from room to room to room all day long. And he would go to the piano and then he would go back and wander and then go to the piano and go back. And that one time when he was writing a song about a cigarette.
I know what song you're talking about. The sound of a cigarette when it hits the water goes. Psst.
I don't know that one, but that was probably it. That's so fucking funny. It's just too funny because that's what he was going through in his life. I mean, my mom was very disappointed in him in many ways. She wanted him to be a more hands-on, better husband, a more hands-on, better father. But I think that she really accepted his ability very early on and knew that he changed. She married someone different. And he changed over the years and he grew and he became more ill. And it was hard for her because she's raising 2 kids. And by the way, she was 20 fucking years old when she had me. She's my daughter's age. And you get married at 16. And then all of a sudden this man's creativity just goes into this like huge catapult. And she was trying to like embrace it, support it, be there for him as a friend, a wife, a supporter, but also terrified. Yeah. Seeing him start to take drugs, seeing him trip out, freak out, have his things and change. It was a big roller coaster for her. And anyone that age would be so challenged by it. The love was always there and the support was always there.
And it seems like it's still there.
It is still there.
What the fuck do I know? But when I saw a picture recently of her leaning down to him, the picture.
At the premiere, he was in his wheelchair at the premiere of the Beach Boys.
I see the look in her eyes and you're standing right next to her.
Oh, no, this is what happened. She said, please take me to go see your father. I haven't seen him in a long time. And she walked down and she grabbed his hands. And she just looked at him and said, hi, Brian. And he said, Mary. He calls her Mary. Mary. And she said, I love you. I love you, Mary. I love you, Marilyn. I love you, Brian. That was it. Just, I love you. It's a beautiful thing to witness that because it's like as a kid of parents who get divorced, it's like, you're sad. Hold on. You're sad that the marriage did last, but you're so appreciative that they still have love. And it's like that love, I think, has kept him alive. It's kept her alive. And I think that it's something that is kind of in their cells. It'll never leave them. And it's because they were so young that they were all friends, including Carl. Carl's a big part of that. And Dennis.
In what way?
When they first knew each other back in the day, when they would hang out, Mom was, 14 or 15, and Carl was, young also. They were just young teenagers, and time was different. It was all about like getting in your car and cruising around, and there was just no distractions whatsoever. It was so pure, but it was like the sense of humor that Dad and Carl had. Mom also shared that, and Auntie Dee Dee and Ginger and Auntie Barbara. It's like Mom's two sisters, Barbara and Diane, and cousin Ginger. They all shared that humor with Dad and Carl and Dennis, and they did a lot of laughing. Mom said that Carl and her were very close, and there was just so much laughter. And then the laughter kind of went away. Then it became a lot more serious. So she always said to me, there's kind of like this divider. There was like the line when it crossed over from really joyous and really beautiful and fun and whatever, and family and laughter and creativity and music. And then it went into another land that was way more dark and something that was unfortunate.
Do you think it was because of drugs entering the picture? Is it because of the new crowd he was hanging out with?
Probably both. I do think drugs is the answer. And you can really hear it in Smile and parts of Surf's Up. There's this almost like scary melancholy feeling.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm thinking that I'm having trouble actually picturing you putting on Pet Sounds to listen to it for enjoyment. What is your relationship really with Pet Sounds? Current day I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because it's not an album. It's not a fluffy puppy like Friends.
Right. When I hear Don't Talk, to me, that's one of his most tender vocals ever.
Without a doubt.
It actually rips my soul apart. It goes into a spiritual place that I really can't explain either. And it's a feeling of like, I'm proud of it. I'm proud of him, but it's extremely sad. And it's like my own sort of flashbacks of like, wouldn't it be nice? Reminds me of my childhood. But then wouldn't it be nice? Kind of has a 60s feel. Then wouldn't it be nice? I think about my mom and dad being married. Sloop John B. Sloop John B was a lot of fun. It's a fun song. I think of Al. A lot. But, mostly when I hear, and you say, oh, it's kind of like a Brian Wilson solo album with Beach Boys singing backgrounds, I kind of don't agree with that. I do in some ways, but I've always said, there's just no fucking way they would have their success if it wasn't for the five of them.
I am a Beach Boys fan.
Yeah.
Not just a Brian Wilson fan, but Caroline No came out as a Brian Wilson singer, and I think he was trying to communicate something with that.
Yeah. Caroline No, I mean, oh God, his voice. My mom had a lot of influence on me in terms of how I would feel when I would listen to the songs, because she was very, very moved by his singing and his songwriting. So she would say to Wendy and I when we were growing up, listen to the way he sings this. Listen to his phrasing. Listen to the way he jumps from one note to the next and the way he slides into notes and his falsetto. And because he was very insecure about his falsetto. Yeah. He was very intimidated by men who had low voices. And I think that it scared him too, because I think it reminded him of his dad. That's just my opinion. And so for instance, a couple weeks ago, I went to his house and I was talking about Frank Sinatra, because we have this love affair with Frank Sinatra. And I didn't know it, but my dad has loved him all these years, and so have I. I had no idea. But for 20 years straight, every single day, my husband and I have had on our little iPod thing, Frank Sinatra's on a loop. We never shut it off. And at this point, we think it's like fucking superstitious. We're not going to shut it off. Something bad's going to happen.
It's playing in your house at all times?
At all times, 24 hours a day.
That's amazing.
And it has since we started living together. I mean, or since the kids. So it's 19 years. So all day long, like somebody else in the wee small hours, don't sleep on the subway, baby. It's so fucking funny. And I didn't know that Dad would fall asleep to Frank Sinatra. And I'm totally going off track, and I forgot what I was saying. Fuck, I want to get reeled in. Oh, I was at his house, and he loves Secret Love. So I like to make Dad laugh because he tends to be very serious, but you gotta say the right thing that'll make him laugh. And certain things make him laugh. And by the way, they're not typical. I mean, when we would go to the movie theater and we saw Young Frankenstein, when everybody was like scared and sad, he was like going, ha 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 ha. in the theater laughing.
Yeah.
But then he'd have the opposite effect. He would get scared if someone was funny. So Gene Wilder was like, I'm a rather brilliant surgeon. Perhaps I could help you with that hump. And, Marty Feldman goes, what hump? There wasn't one crack of a smile on his face. Who knows what he was thinking? That's funny to me, So he always would gravitate towards like a man's low voice. So he would like play around and like sing really low just to get a reaction, just to hear his low tones at that moment. So a couple weeks ago, I went to his house and I was like, once I had a secret love, and he thought that was so he went, he looked at me, he gave this laugh, and it was so funny because I knew it was going to make him laugh if I would sing really low. And they said to me, Albert, one of his caretakers, he said, he hasn't laughed like that in a long time. And I was making him laugh because I go, what the fuck? And he thought that was so funny. His sense of humor is so great. He's always been very fixated with certain things. Obsessive, it's so almost a form of OCD. And I have it. And my daughters have it. Like, he's obsessed with hair. He's obsessed with long hair. Somebody that's bald scares him. Somebody that's tall intimidates him. A low voice intimidates him because he always used to feel insecure about his high voice. But my mom would say to him, no, that's a beautiful thing, Brian. I hope that over the years and now today that he appreciated his own falsetto because there was nothing like it.
This episode is brought to you in part by Bespoke LA. Located in the Fairfax district of Los Angeles, Bespoke LA is the modern podcaster's dream come true. It's got 2 podcast pods available, one with audio only and the other with both audio and video. Just think, you can start your own podcast tomorrow without investing a single penny in equipment. What, you don't have experience editing? Don't even sweat it. For an additional fee, Bespoke LA can edit your podcast. Or not, it's entirely up to you. Rates start at $75 an hour with discounts if you book 4 sessions at once. Go to bespokela.com/podcast. That's BSPOKELA.com/podcast for more information or to book your time today. And be sure to tell them that Dave sent you for a one-time 25% discount. I want to say officially, I am trashing my notes. Let me rephrase that. I'll repurpose them because I'll be talking with other people about these records. I want to just follow the flow of this conversation.
Right. I know.
I prefer that it's creating its own shape. So I want to touch on all the records, but I don't want to try to rein stuff in because I love and appreciate where this is going. So I just want to say for the record, that's going to be the course moving forward here.
That's great. And at any time, if you want to ask me, to a certain bell or an echo or a horn on a song, I'm fine to talk about that too.
That's a waste of time. I could ask the historians about that. But I do want to say, when it comes to Pet Sounds, that I Just Wasn't Made for These Times is tied for first for me for my favorite song of all time.
Really?
I Just Wasn't Made for These Times and Listen to the Lion by Van Morrison.
What I want to say about a lot of his singing on this record, he dug deep. I think he's the most vulnerable vocally on this album.
Do you think he still feels this way? Does he feel like he wasn't made for these times? Because at that time, there was so much going on with potential resistance within the band about, messing with a particular formula or what have you. But now we're decades beyond that. Does he still feel like he wasn't made for these times? Or is he just living life now? Are we way past that?
I think he's been living life for a long time. It's sort of coupled with that. I don't think that's ever going to go away. And I truly believe that in my own alcoholism, I think he's an alcoholic. He's a recovering alcoholic, and that he's a true alcoholic comes from alcoholism in his family. So do I. And do we ever feel like we're made for these times? Do we ever feel comfortable in our shell? Have we always felt different than other people? Yeah. But that's probably just ego.
Yeah.
And he's the first one to admit it, that he has an ego. We all have an ego. He gets lost in, what he's thinking. There's a very huge selfish part of him. Extremely selfish man who's wrapped in his own thoughts, has been forever. And I think that comes from damage. And I think that comes from deep feeling and sensitivity. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you got all these people all these years saying, you've created something that nobody else has, or you're ahead of your time. And it sort of plants in you that you're different. I think he has always been very overwhelmed by the reaction of his music because his intention was never to get a reaction. I don't think it ever was. And when he was sort of forced, like he took drugs, it scared the fuck out of him. He didn't want to go on the road. I'll stay back and be the creative one. You guys go and you carry on fun, or whatever it is, or all these songs. And I'll go back and just get introspective and get what's in me out. He did that. But I don't think it was driven by what are people going to think. I think it was, there's a lot going on in this fucking head and heart, and I got to get it out. And the only way I know how to do that is through music. That's what I think.
Yeah. You know, if you go trace it back from when that arrangement was agreed upon, that he would hang back up until he consciously decided to abandon Smile. You were born in April 68, which means you were conceived in July 67, which was weeks after he consciously abandoned Smile. So in a sense, I don't know if it was decided upon that your mom and your dad were going to have a child, or if your mom just got pregnant, but it's almost that you were like the next big project. We're going to have Carnie. Did your mom just get pregnant, or were they trying to have a child?
I don't know the answer to that, or I don't remember, but I do know that they were in Hawaii when I was conceived. And we've got some pictures of them. She had this floral dress on.
So for late in Hawaii.
Yeah. But I don't know the answer to that. Maybe he was too freaked out about Smile. And I think it was more by accident. I don't think they were planning it. But I think it was definitely a plan, God's plan, you know, for her to get pregnant. They thought I was going to be a boy.
Oh, I know. Because one of my favorite songs is When a Man Needs a Woman.
I was listening to that. So I remember being younger and listening to it and going, you know, a man needs a man when the two get together. Oh, 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 oh. It reminded me of like, oh, then now they're going to fuck, you know, then they're going to get into that, you know, when they get together. Oh, that happens. It's so fucking funny. Cutest song. Oh,
I have to think that that was Dennis that wrote that line, because that's not just Brian Wilson who wrote that. The whole band wrote that song.
I love when they all wrote together. And there was another song that I was just listening to where they all had their input. And I was like, I bet you anything that was Dennis's line. I bet you anything that was Carl. Even with down all the way to Let It Shine with Dad and Jeff Lynne, you know. I think Smile just kind of maybe flipped him out and he had to step back.
Was that a verboten topic growing up in the Wilson household? The topic of Smile, was it ever brought up around the dinner table?
No, it wasn't. But I remember when I was like 5 going into kindergarten, my mom sat us down and she said, I want you to know that your father is a musical genius and he's not going to be a father like other dads. But one day you will grow up and you will appreciate his contribution. He loves you very much, but he's just not able to be a daddy. How does a 5-year-old take that? I don't know. I don't even remember really how I reacted. But I think she was trying to not excuse him, but just be like really fucking real. And that's one thing that I really am grateful for, is my mom has always been extremely transparent and at the same time hiding a lot of really dark, weird shit too, that over the years she has told me about. Stuff that he did and some behavior things that were really out there and are private and stuff, and just, you know, things that people don't know or don't expect. We all have our secrets. We all have the things that we are proud of, ashamed of, wish we could take back, or, you know, wish we had done, or regrets and everything. But I just think that she did the best she could and that he did the best he could. You know, it's not like he had this role model of a dad being this loving dad. The love came out in really different ways, especially when you look at today. It's like, God forbid, you know, we raise a hand to them. God forbid we squash their self-esteem. God forbid we do something that's politically incorrect and we're walking on fucking eggshells, you know. I would never want to harm my child. But back in the day, we didn't realize that we were harming them and that there were long-term effects. I think if Murray was alive today, that his behavior would be different.
I see how you look. The times that I've seen you with your daughter or daughters, the way you look at them, I know that whatever went on in your household growing up, that you have been able to take your home life and shape it in a way that has nothing to do with some of the troubling things that we're talking about. How do you then take your upbringing and leave it behind you and create a stable, loving, fantastic household?
Well, I also remember a lot of beautiful moments too. You have to understand that there were weird things that stuck out in my brain. Like when Wendy was about 3, we had this backyard. There was the upper backyard and was the lower backyard in Bel Air. There were 2 yards. It was a huge piece of property. And of course, everything looks bigger when you're younger, but it was big. And one time Wendy fell. We had this, like, we called it the well, and it was in the center. There were fish in there, and Wendy was trying to see the fish, and she fell in. She fell deep, and all you saw was her little hand poking out of this murky water, like black water, really dirty. And I freaked out because she was going to drown. And I ran in and said, Mommy, Daddy, Wendy fell in. I don't know what I said. But I just have this memory of my dad, my mom, and Auntie Sherry Champion running down the hallway and Dad lifting her out with her one hand, just picking her up and saving her life. And that's a very big memory for me. And that was like a moment when I was like, my daddy is a hero. My daddy saved my sister. And so that is a beautiful memory to me that he did that. And then I remember Christmas morning waking up and, running to their bedroom. They got me this bike I wanted and this little play kitchen set. And I remember waking up Mom and Dad when they were in bed. And that's a beautiful memory. And even sitting at the counter watching Bewitched and the Brady Bunch with his quick eating really fast, and then him starting to cough. It was funny. So I have to remember that there are beautiful times. MIU, we were singing it all over on the microphone. Cherokee Studios, being in the studio. There were beautiful times in my life that I will never forget. Some of them were at home. Some of them were in the studio.
Let me ask you about MIU, if I can, for a second. So was meditation a thing when you were growing up? Did he indoctrinate you into TM?
Mike was really into it. That was his savior, because he'd be dead about that, for sure.
He still is, I think so.
Oh, yeah. And then Carl was into it more. Carl had a meditation room at Cherokee Studios built for him to meditate in. He definitely needed to decompress. It was the only way. And then years later, he drank a lot of wine. I remember him drinking a lot of wine. But I think that meditation was definitely the way that he calmed down. And Dad, I don't remember meditating at all. But I remember Mike and I remember Uncle Carl.
Was it at all a thing for you or no?
No, but I'll tell you what I do remember. They put me in, it was called EST.
Oh,
and
no.
Like this, yeah. And they put me through that. And that was a fucking horrible thing to do.
Yeah.
And I just remember being in this room with all these kids. And I was sitting face to face with somebody because I was a thumb sucker. And I had so much comfort sucking my thumb. I did when I was younger and everything. And I remember sitting in the seat and they were like, why do you suck your thumb? You can't suck your thumb. It was like this horrible, abusive, shaming thing. And then I remember all I cared about was that we got this little cup of granola as a snack. And then we lay down for a little nap. And I remember seeing, you're not going to believe this, I remember seeing Harvey Korman and Tim Conway.
Oh my God.
outside the room at Est. Because I loved Carol Burnett. But then that was also mixed with Dr. Landy and weird shit that happened with me at home with Dr. Landy that was very, very unpleasant and very horrible that I know my mom regrets.
So with regard to Landy, you were under his care as well? I didn't realize.
When I was in the fourth grade, I think, when Landy came into Dad's life, I went through a very angry period. And I had some therapy. I don't even really know what I was angry at. I think I spent a lot of time being very embarrassed and knowing that Dad was different and that certain things embarrassed me. But it was more, who knows? It could have been like I saw other parents with their kids and maybe I didn't have that. But I was overweight. I was eating. I was teased. I was really, really bullied. That was probably it. But it was very hard for me. Very sad and very troubling. And I spent a lot of time being shamed for being fat. And I remember they were trying to straighten me out, so Dad was under Landy's care. So we're going to try this on Carnie too and see if she starts listening more. And so I had chores, I had to make my bed and I got these little chips. I had to earn a chip for breakfast. They were blue and they were red. They were little like and I had to earn them to eat. Earn them. It was really fucked up.
That's crazy. So this is around 15 Big Ones. It's around the same kind of time?
77?
So around Love You, Adult Child.
Yes. And then I remember Landy, he had this associate. I think his name was either Joey or I forgot his name. He was weird. And they always had these phones and they would say, oh, Carney's doing this. She's not listening. And I was outside. They asked me to come inside. I was playing and I didn't listen. And he said, lock her in the sauna. And they locked me in the sauna. My mom came home and said, what the fuck is going on here? And that was it. Landy was out, he was fired, and we were done. So that was not a pleasant thing. I hated Dr. Landy because I thought he was fucking insane. I mean, he was insane. He was the insane doctor, in my opinion. He had weird ways of doing things, but at the same time, it's like, Dad loved him. He did. He called me the day he died, and he said, Carnie, I'm calling to tell you that Dr. Landy died, and it's a very sad day for me. He said, I know a lot of people didn't like him, but I loved him. And I said, I know, Dad. But I didn't want to say to him, I thought he was horrible. He kept everybody away from him. I wasn't allowed to see my dad. And that's fucking wrong. And that wasn't just 6 months. That was a long period of time.
How long was it?
Jesus Christ, it was years and years. That was the second time. He had 2 times with him.
I know the second time, the day that it ended, I know your dad called Andy Paley and said, Landy's gone, I'm ready to record. And he came over that day and started making music with him.
You know, the thing that really made me sick to my stomach, like just actually wanted to like really vomit, is that he was co-writing songs with Dad. When I found out that he was writing songs, I said, this fucking wannabe, desperate, low-life scum that just latched onto somebody so vulnerable, wanting to fill out his own fantasy. It made me sick.
All right, that about does it. Please keep in mind this is entirely how I support my wife and 6-year-old son, so don't risk feeling badly about yourself by not supporting Discograffiti. Become a member so you don't miss a single thing at patreon.com/Discograffiti. Stay tuned because next week we've got the second installment of the Carnie Wilson Discograffiti interview. Okay, here's the week up ahead. This Sunday, our weekly show within a show, the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound podcast, drops for our Patreon's private tier. These are real people with talent and a burning fire deep inside, just like you and I. Then come Monday, the great Dominic Priori will be here to rate and discuss the Beach Boys' second LP, Surfin' USA. This episode will be offered on our Patreon's major tier only, but is available for purchase as well. Don't miss it or you'll only be getting part of the story. And then on Wednesday, the Lieutenant tier gets their early release, ad-free, super extended director's cut of the Carnie Wilson Discograffiti interview. It's the show as it was truly intended to be heard, with all the essentials left intact, including 13 additional minutes of essential material. And then come Friday, everyone else gets to join in on the action. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, Carnie Wilson, Joe Kennedy for that killer new theme song, Dennis Dyken, Jeff McAvoy, Rudy Fishman, Becky Boyd, Jay Schultz, Bespoke LA, my mom, my dad, my incredibly loyal fans, and especially the entire Patreon community, the Soldiers of Sound. I love every last one of you, and this show would not exist without you, my friends. Speaking of friends, it's high time for some new ones. They're in our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. That's the best way to find out what's coming up on the show, but there's a hell of a lot more. You get recaps of the day in music history, the ability to pitch questions to guests, polls that put you in the driver's seat on guest and band decisions, access to a thriving creative hub if you're looking for a collaborator, and much, much more. So make sure you don't miss out. You can find the link to the Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound Facebook page right there in the show notes. And if you don't mess with the Zuck, no sweat. Just email me at info@discograffiti.com and I'll keep you in the loop. So now that it's done and you want more, another way to dive even deeper into classic rock and roll from the 1960s is to leap headfirst into the Righteous Brothers Bill Medley interview. That's episodes 181 and 182. My interview with the Free Design, that's 160 to 162. My epic interview with the Mamas and the Papas, Michelle Phillips, that's 141 to 159. Blood, Sweat, and Tears, that's 137. My 12-hour interview with Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander from The Association, that's 109 to 113. Vashti Bunyan rating her entire output, that's 103 to 104. Sergio Diaz from Os Mutantes, that's 86 and 87. Bert Summer is 83 and 84. Sweetwater, 79. Our 2-episode tribute to David Crosby is 77 and 78. Andrew Tuttle rates the Monks is 74. Jim Florentine on Black Sabbath is 64 to 68. Lou Barlow and the Zombies is 59 and 60. Marvin Gaye biographer David Ritz rates Marvin Gaye is 45 to 47. Blind Faith is 43. Anthony Fantano rates the Velvet Underground is 32 and 33. Bob Forrest rates the band is 25 and 27. Monkees manager Andrew Sandoval rates the Monkees, that's 22 and 23. Don Randy rates David Axelrod as 17. Badfinger is 16. The Bee Gees is 10 and 11. Sly and the Family Stone is 5, 6, and 7. And Pink Floyd is 1 and 2. And of course, be sure to mark your calendars, because next Friday, January 31st, we're coming at you with the second installment of the Carnie Wilson Discograffiti interview. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. And so, from now till then, don't let our youth go to waste, lads and ladies. It's Discograffiti!